Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. First of all, if you have not played Vow of the Disciple and don't want to get spoiled, please turn off the video now. If you can play it before reset, please do. I'm going to be talking about the raid, and there are going to be spoilers, and as best as I can limit them, there will be fewer spoilers in thumbnails than I originally intended because of the way that Contest is working. Of course, it got extended by an extra 24 hours. But still, if you don't want to be spoiled, you should be staying away from my channel after Monday. There are going to be raid spoilers in the thumbnails. I'm going to be talking about things in the raid, and I'm not going to hold back because this is something that needs to get talked about. It's a rough thing to go ahead and have to do, and it sucks that Contest did have to get extended by an extra 24 hours because of connection issues. I know normally that would give people enough time to go ahead and play through the raid on a Sunday, but as it stands, I can't afford to change the content schedule. This is just the way that my job is. So, if you want to go ahead and go in blind, wait until next weekend. Don't even look at my channel because this entire week I'm going to be covering the raid. So, stay away as best you can. Today, however, I just wanted to talk about the raid in general terms and give my overall impressions. I don't even normally do this for raids. They don't generally require it. But this time, I think I had to. Vow of the Disciple will be seen as one of the most special raids that has ever been produced for almost every single reason and by almost every single metric. But when it comes to the lore especially, it changes everything. So today, we're going to cover a bunch of things about the raid in brief and do a bit of a big overview without going into massive detail about all the different things that get uncovered. That's what we'll be doing in future videos. Also, as a small note, please let me know if you want something specifically done in the comments as to whether you want the Vow of the Disciple to be covered in a single mega video or as a series. I am heavily leaning right now towards multi-video stuff because it's much more topic focused, and I feel like that actually works a lot better for the Vow of the Disciple because there are big topics that you can go ahead and do, and it's just so vast that I don't think a single video would be able to cover everything with the detail that's demanded. Also, Dynasty took me 10 months, and that took a lot out of me. I don't know if I have it in me for another big single video project, but I don't know. If it's so overwhelming in the comments that it's obvious I have to, I will, but yeah, just know that that's where I'm leaning right now. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. But first, I wanted to let you all know that this video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Food is an important part of anyone's day for all the obvious reasons, but it does come with a bunch of extra hassle that sometimes just doesn't feel worth it. However, it doesn't need to be that way thanks to HelloFresh. HelloFresh sends mouth-watering seasonal recipes right to your door, as well as fresh, pre-portioned ingredients for you to use to cook them. HelloFresh offers you so many recipes to choose from each week that if you're looking to try something new, you've got plenty of options. You've also got all sorts of options for meals, whether you're looking for something to cook for the family, or whether it's something that you want to be a little bit healthier, or even if you're vegetarian or pescatarian, you've got options there. It's also a great way to save on money, given that you're not buying more food than is in a single portion, which means that you're not going to be spending money on food that ultimately you're going to throw in the trash and waste food. Even at full price, you'll be saving money using HelloFresh to buy your food. Less food waste is also better for the environment, and the packaging used in HelloFresh boxes is also recycled, so they're helping on all sorts of different fronts. But perhaps the best part for me personally is that a service like HelloFresh can take the time and stress out of cooking. I know for a fact that sometimes my wife and I will cook something that we want to take our time over and put some love into, but sometimes we just want something quick and simple. HelloFresh has recipes for both moods. From 20-minute meals to meals with easy cleanup to low prep options, there are plenty of ways that HelloFresh is respecting your time in your busy life. So what are you waiting for? Use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use code POGBIFE16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 surprise gifts across 6 HelloFresh boxes plus free shipping. Gifts include free appetizers, free desserts, and free premium recipes. Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. So, where do we begin? Well, I think we should start by talking about the final boss of the raid. If you really don't want spoilers, by the way, this is the point at which you absolutely should turn off. I know I gave a warning earlier, but just in case, seriously. This is where things get very, very interesting. You ready? Okay. The raid boss, Rulk, the first disciple of the Witness, is an absolutely brilliant character, and I'm going to explain why. Out of every raid boss we've faced, including Oryx and Riven, he easily has the most dialogue in and out of the raid, which means there's a ton of chances for exposition as he tells us a story about himself and about those that he serves and about the goals that he is attempting to accomplish. This happens with this slow, mysterious build towards the final boss of the raid, but it also happens in the mission that released after the world first raid clear had occurred, and it does so in that mission to much greater effect. You can hear about where Rulk is from, how the Witness interacted with him, and how it changed him. That degree of storytelling alone means that Rulk is already a cut above most raid bosses in the first instance, so that's exciting to see. But then, I think it also needs to be told that, well, the developers generally at Bungie have all pulled out the stops to make sure that every aspect of the raid is telling Rulk's story. And it's this point that I really want to go ahead and really briefly touch on the environmental design of the raid, which, again, not something I thought I'd be doing, but it's just so good that I think I have to. More so than any other raid, Vow of the Disciple tells a story through its aesthetic, which is not what I expected to say about a raid set inside a darkness pyramid, where everything tends to be just creepy geometry. But no, this place is very much different. This place is Rulk's domain, and it's treated as his own. You can absolutely see that with the way that different parts and pieces of it are used. Walking through this raid feels like you're Indiana Jones or Lara Croft. The pyramid at the heart of the raid is Rulk's lair, but it's also part temple complex in worship to the Witness, part mausoleum to those too weak not to drown in the deep, and part private collection documenting Rulk and his storied history with the Witness, and all those who have either chosen to worship the Witness and to follow its creed, or who have stood against them. Especially in that final mission, you get to see a lot more context about the really intriguing things you see, especially in that first encounter because that's the area that's predominantly explored. But even as you go through the rest of the different areas, you can start to understand vaguely what's going on with the different parts of the pyramid. I've never really gotten a sense of that in many different places in Destiny in such a subtle and yet refined manner. The first boss, for example, being called the Caretaker, and the fact that all of the different areas of the pyramid could sort of fit into the catalogue of a museum as well as the inner workings of it. Yeah, it all speaks to this general theme of Rulk as a sort of studied historian and one who is so sure in the rightness of his cause that you can't help but feel as though he is bound to ignore any plea that you might have. This is someone who has seen the history of all those that have faced up against the Witness and seen them all crumble to dust. This is someone who is so sure of their part within the universe and the role that the Witness has to play in its grand plan that honestly, I don't believe that you could sway their opinion even if you tried. That's a really strong place to come from, just based purely on what the environmental design makes you feel. While we're talking about environmental design, I should say that everyone is going to talk about the biggest set piece within the raid, and frankly, they're not wrong to. The subjugated worm god in the middle of the raid isn't a boss or anything, but it's so gargantuan that you can kind of use its, well, massive body to track where you are in the raid as you head towards the final boss encounter. Your progress towards the final boss arena, of course, is also something you can directly see from the first encounter, and honestly, the entire mood and atmosphere of all of that, when the dark power of the Disciple of the Witness is really on display, it's just totally unbeatable in terms of mood. Even the fact that the worm is found in this way is really a sign of where everything sits in the hierarchy of the darkness, and it shows that Rulk really is beyond any other dark power that we've faced before. And on that note, let's go ahead and talk about how this raid changes our understanding of that hierarchy. It was at one point assumed that the Hive were one hand of the darkness, closely worshipping it and holding an intimate understanding of its truths. Lore such as the Books of Sorrow are seen as such an important piece of lore because, well, they've become a really important bedrock for some of the earliest stories in Destiny, and are seen as the origin story of the Hive. But the thing about those books is that, well, they're written from the perspective of the Hive, and as a result, they're biased and even self-aggrandizing to the Hive. The lore of the Vow of the Disciple and the follow-up Preservation mission essentially takes that lore and puts it into a new perspective, upending it for all to dissect even further. Rulk is higher up the rungs of the hierarchy of the darkness, and as a result tells us a completely different story of the Witness, its minions, and more, even going so far as to rewrite the framing we know about Hive lore, and essentially shows us that the Hive and the Worm Gods were just tools to serve the purposes of the Witness. Rulk even says as much in the Preservation mission, calling the Worm Gods chattel and the Hive puppets. The lore of Vow of the Disciple reframes the whole of the Hive's lore, and yes, it is technically some kind of retroactive continuity, but this is not a bad retcon. In fact, it's a really good one. It's one that adds further context and enhances the lore that already exists there without diminishing it. If nothing else, it just shows not much has really been changed. It's simply a moment at which we get to see the further context of how the Worm Gods were brought into being. It adds to that legend at the very beginning, and also it tells us a little bit more about, again, the fact that the Hive were self-aggrandizing, and that when Oryx sat and spoke to the deep, maybe it was one of those truly breakthrough moments, but also, I imagined that when Rulk sees those kind of accomplishments and reads about the various things in the Books of Sorrow, his reaction must be looking at that and then laughing as though Oryx is some pitiful child. You see, from the perspective of the Hive, the tales of the Books of Sorrow tell of their grand crusades and many genocidal campaigns, and all of that is the stuff of vaunted legend to them. But to Rulk and the Witness, I feel like the reaction to all of that might be something close to, "Oh, that's cute," or "Oh, yeah, that's so interesting, Timmy, yep, yeah, totally, yep." Vow of the Disciple adds a wealth of new lore into the game, but the way that it makes us reevaluate the old lore is equally fascinating, and it can't be understated how important that really is. I should also go ahead and just give some praise to just how much lore is packed into the raid overall and the surrounding elements. The storytelling in this is, well, there's a lot of it, way more than I initially anticipated. First of all, you have the storytelling with the dialogue that's been hinting to what was inside the pyramid. That occurs during the Parasite mission when you run through Birthplace of the Vile for the first time. It also plays in the Ghosts story mission just a little bit, when Finch sits there and basically says, well, how did the Scorn get in? If Savathûn's throne world is bathed in light, they must have some kind of powerful darkness fueling them. And then, of course, you have everything else that comes when the raid has actually been released. You have the dialogue from Rulk in the raid that leads up to the final encounter, the environmental storytelling throughout the raid, the Shattered Suns lore book, the Preservation mission, the lore tabs from all the armor, the lore tab from the raid exotic, the collectible lore tabs. There's just so much stuff to go through as far as the raid lore is concerned, and frankly, it'll be a long time before we've uncovered everything that this raid has truly brought to light. But more so than that, it touches on something that is truly spectacularly unique in this instance. We've sat there and done raids like King's Fall, or, say, Last Wish, and they've always touched on elements of Destiny's lore that we've known something about. When we killed Oryx, we knew what the Hive were, and we knew about all sorts of things like the World's Grave, and how Crota was Oryx's son. When we went and raided Last Wish, we knew vaguely about the Ahamkara, and we knew that Mara had sort of been keeping something in the center of the Dreaming City, and that there was some kind of reason to prepare for the raid. But with all of that being said, Rulk and the raid lore that's provided in Vow of the Disciple is something completely unique. It is this weird in-between point between the Hive's story and the actual Witness itself, and it explores planets and places and peoples that we've never seen before, and never will because, well, it's only recorded in Rulk's histories here. I, in particular, cannot wait to see what goes on in the Shattered Suns lorebook, which I'm not completely unlocked on yet, and I've not completely read, but wow, it's going to be quite the time reading through that and understanding what it was like. Because, yeah, not to bring up too many things in that lore book, which I vaguely know must have happened from the dialogue, but yeah, we may get a true glimpse at the Witness's true power. If that happens, this makes this some of the most important lore in Destiny's history. One last thing I wanted to touch on is how yet again the raid does well to again make the greater point of the Witch Queen narrative clear, that light and darkness as forces have to be seen as separate from the Traveller and the Pyramids, and that the world of Destiny is now far more nuanced and divisible than it's ever been. This is illustrated in the most brilliant way using the raid's mechanics, and yeah, this is where we're going to talk about the symbols of the raid. Stay with me here, this is going to sound like nothing at first, but it leads to a point where I think it's actually kind of important. There are 26 symbols that appear throughout the raid, and they are tied to the mechanics. Some of them are nebulous and generalist, like stop, kill, or give. Others are much more personal to us and very recognizable, things like Tower, Guardian, or Earth. Some of them describe our enemies, or their bastions, or intricate moments of power that were very much tied to the darkness. Things such as the Ascendant Plane, Savathûn, the Scorn, or the Black Garden. Each of these symbols helps to paint a picture of the understanding that both we and the minions of the Witness have for our own story, the story of Hyr and Sol. It sounds like a small thing, but it feels as though these glyphs tell a story, they tell our story, and ultimately that's even more terrifying because it means the Witness and Rhulk have been, well, witnessing us. But they also tell us more, and I think this is where it really comes to that point of saying that there is a difference between the light and dark, as they are not truly tied to the Traveller and the Pyramids intrinsically. There is the distinction that is made that the light and dark are forces of the universe, whereas the Traveller and the Pyramids are entities with agendas. And I think again, this is really driven home in the final boss encounter. In the last encounter with Rhulk, when you go into the boss DPS stage, you need to go ahead and dunk different essences on 4 static totems that never change position. The cool thing about these 4 totems is you can subdivide them into all sorts of different manners. So, for example, if you want to divide things into the different elements that are tied to the light, you have the light itself in the front right, and you have the Traveller in the front left. But if you want to divide things into the primal powers in Destiny's universe, you go to the front right for light and the back right for darkness. If you want to divide things into the sort of quote-unquote darkness, evil side of the universe, although again I'm going to disprove the point of evil here, you go to the back right and back left. On the back left, you find the pyramid. And again, if you want to look at the structures, the entities that have individual agendas, you look to the left where you can find the Traveller and the pyramid. This is something that's really strange to look at first, and maybe it seems like nothing, but genuinely I think that this is a very deliberate choice. The light and the dark here are deliberately divided from the pyramid and the Traveller. They have separate symbols, but also, whilst they are somewhat aligned, they are on different sides of the room, and there is a clear division made between them. And it's, I think, trying to drive home forward an even greater point, something that Bungie has been trying to make as a point since the beginning of the Season of Arrivals. The light and dark are primal forces of the universe, and they are not necessarily good or evil. The Traveller and the Pyramids are entities that are closely tied to these powers, and they have agendas, motives, plans, but they can be judged as a result. The light is not inherently good, the darkness is not inherently evil. To judge these primal forces would be like judging gravity or heat or time. But the Pyramids and the Traveller, they can be judged, because they make their own actions in accordance to a set of principles or beliefs. It's a small thing, perhaps, but I don't think this was at all accidental. I think it was a very deliberate choice, and I do believe, for certain, that Bungie's developers knew exactly why this kind of distinction should be made at the final boss encounter, because it's trying to drive home again that point that's been made throughout all of Witch Queen. There are many shades of grey in Destiny's universe now, and to fail to appreciate that and to see things through the binary of light being good and darkness being bad fails to appreciate the grandeur of the entire story that's being told, and how even a being as evil as Savathûn can wield the light, or how a being as good as, say, a Guardian could wield the darkness. It also tells us quite clearly to focus on our true enemy, the Pyramids, because whilst darkness is not necessarily tied to evil, the power of the dark and the shades of darkness in the story are truly there on display when we face the disciple within the pyramid. To face Rhulk, the first disciple of the Witness, is to understand who your true enemy in Destiny is. For years, content has been building to a point like this, and now we have just started to scratch the surface of what we're going to be seeing in Lightfall and the final shape. Vow of the Disciple content is going to be flowing thick and fast in the next few weeks. Wow, I got that right and said it first time. Even so, we aren't even close to scratching the surface of this raid just after having spoken about it for 15 to 20 minutes. So yeah, we're going to uncover more truths, more stuff that lies within the halls of this raid, and more stuff that can be understood from the narrative. As a small final note, if you are on the narrative team, if you worked on this raid, If any of you are watching this, I put a little thread with my thoughts out there on Twitter, but to briefly summarize, I said this. Vow of the Disciple in lore and story terms is far and above the best raid we've ever seen in Destiny. Full stop. You should all be exceedingly proud. This is now the new bar. This shows us everything that a raid in Destiny can be to the narrative of the franchise as a whole. Thank you very much for all the love and attention you put into the story on this one, and for helping to create what is going to be one of Destiny's most memorable raids. But that's all from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want more Destiny content, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe for email notifications. Also, don't forget, comments section down below. Tell me if you have an overwhelming desire for that single mega video, or if focused topics are fine. Honestly, again, I am still leaning towards focused topics and a series of videos, but if you do want one massive mega video, I'm certainly not opposed to it, as long as the demand is so overwhelming that, you know, we don't have some kind of division and split between what people want. Either way, just know that as per usual, your viewership as always is quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Prodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.